Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They wanted a prettier view. I gave them cows. When a suburban HOA tried to seize my family farm with fake maps, bounce houses, and police reports, they didn't expect a goat named Linda, a battle-hardened lawyer, and a war they couldn't win. Welcome to the wildest land dispute in Tennessee. People always say land is just dirt. Those people have never worked it, never bled into it, never walked it at sunrise with frost crunching under boots and breath clouding in the cold. My name's Nat Danvers. I'm 44, third-generation farmer, and I own 150 acres of land in rural Tennessee, right on the edge of a planned suburban community called Willow Heights, a tidy little slice of Stepford with a terrifying number of lawn flamingos and one very determined homeowners association. But my land. It's been in the Danvers family since 1957, before the developers, before the Starbucks, before half the county even had paved roads. This land doesn't belong to their HOA, not by contract, not by mistake, and damn sure not by any moral authority they think they have. For years, we all got along just fine. I'd wave to the folks walking their Shih Tzus past the boundary fence. They'd sometimes buy eggs or honey when I set up a little table out front. We kept our distance like neighbors should. But peace doesn't last when ambition walks in wearing heels and a clipboard. Enter Karen Olden, new president of the HOA, newly divorced, and newly obsessed with beautifying the community. When she first approached me, I was cleaning the hay rake, boots covered in mud, sleeves rolled up. She looked like she'd just walked out of a real estate magazine and smelled something awful. Probably me. She didn't waste time. "Mr. Danvers," she said, flashing a grin so tight I thought her cheeks might snap. "We'd like to talk about incorporating your land into the Willow Heights HOA. I raised an eyebrow. "You and whose army?" She chuckled like I was joking. I wasn't. According to her, the sight of tractors, livestock pens, and a perfectly functional, if rustic farm disrupted the aesthetic harmony of Willow Heights. I offered her a bootful of mud and a firm no. "This is a working farm, not a front lawn. You don't like the view? Look the other way." She didn't take it well. In the weeks that followed, I noticed HOA cars parked near the edge of my land. One guy in khakis and a polo took pictures of my cows like they were trespassing. Another woman asked if I'd consider selling just the southern acres for a community dog park. I nearly spit out my coffee. That's when I realized Karen wasn't just playing politics. She was laying the groundwork for something bigger, something territorial. And as far as I was concerned, she was about to find out what happens when you try to annex a Danvers farm without asking nicely. If I thought Karen's little speech about aesthetic harmony was the end of it, I was sorely mistaken. That woman didn't just leave my land and sulk like a normal person. No, she regrouped like a battlefield general, except instead of soldiers, she had a platoon of middle-aged board members with clipboards and a god complex. Within a week, the organized revenge campaign was in full swing. The first strike came on a Tuesday morning. I woke up, poured my usual coffee, and stepped out to check on the southern pasture. That's when I saw it. A bright white plastic sign hammered right into the fence post by the road. Bold letters, HOA logo at the top, and beneath it in red, future site of Willow Green Community Park, coming soon. My name wasn't on it. Neither was any kind of permit or contact info, just bold audacity. I laughed at first, figured maybe it was a prank. But then the cars started arriving. Moms in yoga pants with strollers, retirees in visors. One guy even brought his drone. I stood there on my own damn property watching strangers walk between cow patties and hay bales talking about where the tennis courts could go. One lady asked me where the splash pad would be. I told her probably between the electric fence and the septic runoff. By noon, I'd torn the sign down and posted private property, no trespassing notices every 20 feet. I figured that'd be the end of it. It wasn't. Next day, I found a stack of HOA newsletters stuffed in my mailbox. Every single one had a map of Willow Heights with my land shaded in green, as if it was already part of the neighborhood. Proposed expansion zone, it read. I wasn't even a dotted line. They'd redrawn the entire border like it was a game of Monopoly, and they'd landed on Boardwalk. I called the city to confirm. Nope, no such development plan filed. Karen was operating on fantasy, not legality. But in the HOA bubble, fantasy tends to feel like fact. it only got weirder. That Friday, I walked out to check on my chickens and nearly tripped over a deflated bounce house lying in the middle of the field. A huge one, still had the HOA logo spray painted on the side, just lying there like some plastic monument to delusion. And sure enough, next to it was an overturned garbage can filled with juice boxes and snack wrappers. They'd had a party. On my land. Without asking, without telling me, without even leaving a thank you note. I reviewed the security camera footage and there it was. Clear as day. Karen leading a crowd of suburbanites in through the roadside ditch, kids laughing, adults setting up chairs. They danced, they played, they ate popsicles, and when they left, they dragged the trash about 10 feet and figured that was good enough. I saw Karen clapping along with the music, as if she'd just liberated the land from tyranny. I was too stunned to be angry at first, just stood there with my mouth open, watching what was supposed to be a cow pasture get turned into HOA Woodstock. The next morning, someone left a gift basket on my porch. Local soap, handmade candles, a coupon for a Pilates class, and a handwritten note. Thank you for hosting our first HOA Family Fun Field Day. Looking forward to future collaborations. Willow Heights HOA. I stared at it like it was a box of cursed artifacts. That's when I knew we'd entered a different phase of the conflict. This wasn't just nuisance behavior, this was an attempt to claim my land by normalizing their presence on it, as if the more they used it, the more they thought it would somehow become theirs, like squatters' rights but with more gluten-free muffins. And so I stopped laughing. I bolted every gate. I reinforced the fencing. I posted new signs, not the polite kind. The lawyer approved. Violators will be prosecuted. Kind. And I told my ranch hand, Clay, next time you see someone with a balloon animal on this property, you let the dogs out. It was no longer just about boundaries. It was about principle. You don't let people carve up your land because they don't like the way it smells. You don't let fantasy override ownership. Karen wanted a war of territory. Well, I'd been raised on land, blood, and stubbornness. And if she wanted a battle, I was just getting warmed up. After the bounce house fiasco, it was clear that signs, fences, and common sense wouldn't stop Karen. She wasn't just pushing boundaries. She was steamrolling them in a minivan with HOA decals on the windows. It was time to do what I should have done weeks ago. I called my attorney. Now, I don't scare easy, but even I got goosebumps when Ellie Grant answered my call. Ellie's a legend in property law circles around here. She's the kind of woman who wears cowboy boots under her blazer and once made a real estate developer cry in a zoning hearing. And that was just during introductions. She reviewed my case over the phone, asked for the paperwork, and by the next morning, I was sitting in her office with a USB drive full of camera footage and a binder thick enough to kill a raccoon. She listened, didn't interrupt, just nodded slowly, like she was adding Karen's soul to a spreadsheet of future demolitions. This is one of the most arrogant HOA overreaches I've ever seen, she said, flipping through the fake maps they'd printed in the newsletters. And I've seen one where they tried to fine a guy for snowflakes on his Christmas lights. Let's get to work. We filed suit in the county civil court. 3 key demands. 1. A declaratory judgment reaffirming that my land was never and is not part of Willow Heights HOA. 2. A permanent injunction barring Karen or any HOA members from stepping foot on my property without my explicit permission. 3. Compensatory damages for trespassing, nuisance, and reputational harm to my business, since their antics had started to affect local buyers who thought my land was under HOA review. Karen didn't take it well. 2 days later, I got served back. She filed a counterclaim accusing me of aggressive resistance, hostile signage, and, get this, emotional distress caused by public embarrassment. That last one came with a photo of one of my signs that read, "Private land, not a community dog toilet. HOA, keep out." I'll admit, maybe the wording wasn't subtle. Court prep was no picnic. For 3 weeks, Ellie and I gathered every possible piece of evidence. Drone footage of the trespassers, timestamps from security cameras, text messages from neighbors saying, "Sorry about Karen," and even a signed city zoning map that showed the HOA border stopping a full 200 yards short of my fence line. But even with the facts on our side, I wasn't sleeping much. I've always believed that the law is on the side of the truth. But I've also seen what charm and money can do when they're weaponized. Karen, of course, walked into court like she was heading to a brunch review, blazer pressed, hair perfect, and flanked by two HOA board members who looked like they'd been practicing synchronized nodding in the mirror. The judge, thankfully, was a no-nonsense woman named Honorable Rebecca Stiles, who had the energy of someone who's been disappointed by humanity, one zoning dispute at a time. After opening statements, she raised an eyebrow at Karen and said, "Just so we're clear, you are requesting judicial approval to unilaterally include someone's private farmland in your suburban covenant agreement without deed, contract, or consent." Karen blinked. "Well, when you put it that way, I did. Because that's what's happening." Ellie was surgical. She dismantled the HOA's map with the actual county parcel records, proved that the so-called park announcement sign had no permit, and introduced videos showing HOA guests trespassing, littering, and one guy, this still baffles me, trying to set up a hot dog cart behind my barn. Karen's defense? A long ramble about community vision, shared aesthetics, and something about a gazebo plan that kept changing mid-sentence. At one point, she cited a Pinterest board as inspirational material. By the end of the day, the judge had heard enough. She issued a preliminary ruling in my favor, reaffirming that my property was not and never had been part of Willow Heights. Any future attempt to include it without legal process would result in contempt of court charges. Karen and the entire HOA board were barred from stepping foot on my land under threat of civil penalties. I walked out of that courthouse drained but lighter. The air smelled better, my boots didn't feel as heavy, and for the first time in weeks I thought, maybe this is over. I was wrong. Karen was humiliated, but she wasn't done, because a week later, blue and red lights lit up my driveway, and my farm became the next front in a war I hadn't even realized was still going. I thought court would be the end of it. I really did. After the judge's ruling, I felt like a man finally breathing after being held underwater. But Karen doesn't just lose. She festers. She finds new ways to convince herself the world is unjust and she's the victim. And when that woman festers, she weaponizes emergency services. It started small. A sheriff's cruiser pulled up my driveway around 7:30 one morning. I was out back, feeding the cattle, when I saw the lights flickering through the fog. I walked up with my hands visible. Farming teaches you to treat uniforms with respect. The deputy stepped out, friendly enough, and said they'd gotten a call about unregulated chemical storage. I blinked. "You mean fertilizer?" He laughed. "That's what I figured, but we have to follow up." I walked him over to the shed, showed him everything was bagged, labeled, and USDA compliant. He apologized for the trouble and drove off. I didn't think much of it until the next day. Then it was a call about suspicious black smoke. I'd lit a burn pile of brush, well away from any structures with a permit. The fire truck that rolled up probably cost more than my entire harvest. The crew looked half bored and half annoyed when I showed them the burn barrel and the paperwork. "Another one," one of them muttered. "Third false alarm this week. You piss off somebody in an HOA or something?" I didn't even have the energy to laugh. After that, the calls came like clockwork, every 2 to 3 days. Possible illegal livestock trading. I was selling 2 goats to a neighbor. Gunfire reported. I'd been target shooting at legally designated hours. Strange lights in the barn at night, motion sensors and security floodlights. And once, and I still can't believe this, screams heard from the property. The deputy arrived just in time to find me, yelling at a raccoon who'd stolen my sandwich. Each time I cooperated. Each time the officers left shaking their heads, muttering about Karen as if she were an urban legend. Some even started recognizing me. "Danvers again?" one said. "You must have the most exciting farm in Tennessee." But then came the night it nearly got me arrested. It was a Thursday, quiet, warm, one of those still evenings where even the bugs seemed too tired to buzz. I was inside watching an old western sipping a beer when I saw lights flash across the walls. A lot of lights. I opened the door to see 2 sheriff's cruisers and an unmarked SUV barreling up my drive, floodlights cutting across the field like search beams. I barely got a word out before I was being told to put my hands where they could see them. Apparently, there'd been a report of armed men unloading barrels marked hazardous into a structure behind the barn. That structure? My root cellar. Those barrels? Rainwater storage. The armed men, me and Clay, wearing Carhartt vests and carrying shovels. It took 30 minutes, a full property search, and the arrival of a supervisor who knew me by name before they finally accepted that no meth lab, no weapons cache, no toxic dump was hiding in my backyard. The lead officer apologized, again, and added with a sigh, "You might want to consider filing a harassment claim. We've traced most of the reports back to the same source, anonymous calls from the HOA office landline." Bingo. Karen had traded her clipboard for a phone, calling in complaints like it was a bingo game and she needed a blackout card. That night, I sat on my porch, exhausted and rattled, and watched a patrol car roll back down the gravel drive. Somewhere in the darkness, my goats were bleeding like they were in on the joke, and I thought to myself, "You want war, Karen? Then buckle up. It's my turn to strike back." After the near-arrest fiasco, something inside me snapped, not in a rage, but in that cold, locked-in way a man gets when he's been pushed too far for too long. Karen had turned my home into a battleground. She wanted escalation. She was about to get it. But I wasn't going to stoop to her level. No passive-aggressive flyers or inflatable playground invasions. I was going to fight her where it actually hurt, in court, on record, and with undeniable evidence. I started by turning my farm into a fortress of documentation. I upgraded every single camera on the property, added infrared, motion-triggered systems with cloud backups and full timestamps. I installed an intercom at the front gate. I even mounted a 360-degree cam on top of the old windmill. The place looked like Fort Knox with cornfields. Then came the real gold mine. I subpoenaed the 911 call logs tied to my address. And, sure enough, 9 separate calls over a 28-day period were traced back to the Willow Heights HOA office phone line. And better still, 5 were made during scheduled HOA board meetings, with Karen's name listed as the acting chair present at each one. That's right, she was coordinating false emergency reports from her throne of folding chairs and HOA donuts, and it just kept getting juicier. I spoke with a few sympathetic neighbors, ones who were fed up with the HOA's antics. One couple admitted Karen pressured them into signing a petition claiming my farm created environmental hazards due to livestock runoff. Another neighbor confessed Karen had tried to convince her to testify that my goat Linda was a danger to children. Now Linda is many things, ornery, dramatic, and deeply passionate about eating my hat. But dangerous, only to unattended snack trays. Armed with this, Ellie and I filed a second lawsuit, this time for defamation, malicious prosecution, and abuse of emergency services. We attached the 911 call logs, footage of Linda being, well, Linda, including a 12-second clip where she tries to eat my coffee mug, statements from officers confirming they found no violations or hazardous activity on any visit, and even footage of HOA members trespassing. One guy walked 10 feet into my field, squatted to take a selfie, and got chased by a goose I don't even own. When we handed all this over to the judge, Ellie looked at me with that little smirk of hers and said, "This is better than evidence. It's entertainment." But the cherry on top came from my buddy Clay, who, in a moment of rural brilliance, pulled audio from the security cams where you can hear Karen herself say, "We'll keep calling the cops until he caves in. Sooner or later, he'll sell." We added intentional harassment to the complaint. HOA tried to settle, quietly, a hush-hush agreement, no press, no court, just a small payout and a promise to review board behavior. I told Ellie, hell no. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about principle. About the fact that a woman with a clipboard thought she could steamroll property rights, lie to the police, waste public resources, and then smile through it all like she was doing the neighborhood a favor. Nope. We were going to trial. And for once, I had the upper hand, backed not just by legal documents and affidavits, but by a stubborn goat named Linda, 30 hours of footage, and the ironclad truth. Let the real reckoning begin. The courthouse was packed the day our case went to trial. Not just lawyers and press, though there were plenty of those, but neighbors too. Folks from both sides of the fence, so to speak. Some came out of morbid curiosity, others out of quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, Karen would finally be held accountable. Karen entered the courtroom like it was a fashion show. Pencil skirt, heels sharp enough to carve marble, and that same smug expression she'd worn the day she tried to beautify my tractor off her view. Her lawyer was a stiff, silver-haired man who looked like he practiced law exclusively for banks and yacht clubs. They thought they were going to steamroll me. Poor fools. Ellie, on the other hand, wore boots and a black suit that made her look like Justice in a country music video. She didn't bring a stack of notes. She brought a binder so thick it needed its own briefcase. Inside it, everything: footage, maps, call logs, HOA minutes, screenshots, audio files. Even a notarized vet statement confirming Linda the goat was generally non-aggressive, except in the presence of unattended chili dogs. The judge, same no-nonsense woman from before, was already familiar with the circus surrounding Willow Heights. She didn't look amused. "Let's begin," she said. And we did. Ellie led the charge. First, the 911 call logs, each traced to the HOA office, each attached to a different fabricated claim. Then the security footage. Karen's voice, clear as day, talking about pressuring me to sell. Officers testifying they'd never found evidence of violations. One firefighter even added, "Honestly, I started bringing coffee." We knew it was another Danvers call. Karen's lawyer tried to claim it was all just concerned community oversight. He said she had no intention to harass, that the board was merely proactive. That word got repeated so much, I thought it might start leaking out of the court walls. Then came my turn on the stand. I told them everything. Not as a man out for revenge, but as someone who was tired of being trampled just because someone didn't like the look of cows and fences. I described the stress, the fear the night I thought I might actually be arrested, the impact on my business, the mail from people who thought I'd sold to developers. And I told them about Linda, standing between her food trough and a parade of HOA picnic baskets like a tiny horned sheriff. Karen's lawyer tried to rattle me during cross, suggested I was antagonistic, belligerent, and had provoked the situation with inflammatory signage. "Sir," I said, "if someone was trying to annex your house with a bounce castle, you'd put up signs too." The gallery laughed. Even the judge cracked the tiniest smirk. When closing arguments wrapped, there was a heavy silence in the room. That moment where justice holds its breath. Then the gavel struck. The court ruled fully in our favor. Karen and the HOA were found guilty of defamation, malicious harassment, and coordinated misuse of emergency resources. The ruling stated their actions were an abuse of administrative power driven by aesthetic preference and personal vendetta. The damages? $350,000. That wasn't just for legal costs. It was for every sleepless night, every humiliating accusation, every lost business lead, every wasted police response, and every insult disguised as a potluck invitation. The HOA was ordered to issue a formal public apology, printed in the county paper, posted at their clubhouse, and read aloud at the next board meeting. Karen was stripped of her position, banned from serving on any residential board for 10 years, and referred to the district attorney for potential criminal charges for knowingly filing false reports. When it was over, Ellie and I walked out the front doors into a wave of handshakes, reporters, and applause. Karen, she didn't walk out. She slunk out. Head down, mouth tight, flanked by her now silent army of HOA board members. For the first time since this all began, I felt peace return to the soles of my boots. But the real victory? That came a few days later, and it involved a goat, a megaphone, and the most poetic barbecue you could imagine. But that's a story for the epilogue. 3 weeks after the verdict, the farm was quieter than it had been in months, not just in sound, but in spirit. The air felt lighter, the sky seemed bigger, even the wind through the cornrows whistled like it had a weight lifted off its shoulders. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could wake up without wondering if today's emergency would involve goats, false fire calls, or HOA members with clipboards skulking in the hedges. Naturally, I decided it was time to celebrate. So I did what any self-respecting countryman would do. I fired up the grill, sent out invites to every neighbor who hadn't tried to steal my land, and organized a barbecue the town would talk about for years. We called it the Freedom from HOA Fest. I printed flyers with Linda's face in the center, chewing on a fake HOA badge, and hung them up at the feed store and diner. We had pulled pork, hay bale seating, cornbread, and a band made up of local guys who played bluegrass covers of 80s rock. Ellie even showed up in jeans and brought a bottle of bourbon labeled Legal Victory Reserve. But the real star of the night, a brand new sign I'd spent 2 days carving from oak wood and painting by hand. I unveiled it after the sun dipped behind the silo and everyone gathered around, plates in hand, mouths full of beans. It read, "Private property, not a park, not a playground, no HOA, no Karen, trespassers will be greeted by Linda, and she does not negotiate." Right next to it, mounted on a steel post, was a laminated copy of the court ruling with the words "Access Denied" stamped in red. The crowd roared. Linda herself strutted around in a little sheriff's hat someone made out of cardboard and duct tape, basking in the attention like the legend she'd become. Clay swore she winked at him. Honestly, I believe it. Someone brought cupcakes shaped like tiny court gavels. One guy, a former HOA member who'd switched sides, brought me a gift, a golden-painted clipboard engraved with the words, "Not today, Karen." As the fireflies flickered and the music rolled on into the night, I looked out at my farm, my land, and smiled. This wasn't just a celebration of legal victory. It was about reclaiming peace, about boundaries respected, rights defended, and the simple joy of knowing that a man's land is his own. And as for Karen, last I heard, she moved 3 counties over. Rumor is she tried to join the local garden club, and they told her she needed a permit to speak. Now that's karma. And Linda, well, she still eats my socks, but she earned it.